is Itandehui Jansen. I'm the director of Itu Ninu. This is a feature film set in the future, so it's a sci-fi in the year 2084, and it's mainly a film about climate change. It's also a love story.
So yeah, that's a really interesting mix of themes and subject matter. How did you kind of arrive at mixing those two things?
In the beginning, the film started out in the pandemic, and I was interested in making a film about one character in sort of a smart house. So it was like a migrant, a climate migrant. That idea was always there, sort of stuck in a house that was governed by artificial intelligence. That idea is also still there, but as the idea developed, I found an article that the UK government wanted to tag all the asylum seekers with an electronic tag and follow them around. And I thought, this is so dystopian, I need to put this in the film.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So that's how things started to come together.
So I take it that the setting or the time of 2084, it's sort of harken back to 1984, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
That was a pretty interesting touchstone. It's like, okay, I see where we're going. I think I get the idea here. How much of those elements did you feel like you needed versus where we start to lean into the love story? Did you kind of work on that as you were writing it or developing the project?
Not consciously. We didn't write a script. We had an organic script in the sense that we did have a story, we did have a setting and characters.
Okay.
And the writer, who's also the producer and also the main actor in the film, and I discussed the story, discussed the characters, discussed the different elements, but we never wrote it down. We wanted to have the freedom to sort of improvise, and we kept doing that throughout the film.
Okay.
But we were very much sort of making little references to, let's say, the classic sci-fi books and films that we know.
Right. So one thing, I think it's a very interesting tone that the film has, and I don't want to say it's unconventional, but it is very different. It takes its time, and it requires some patience, and it requires some focus even. And is there any actual dialogue between characters? No, right?
Everything is a voice-off.
Right. So to me, that's a very unique vision, and it's a very unique approach. So is that always what you had in mind? Is that the style you like? Or?
It wasn't the original idea. When I still had the climate migrant who was on his own with the house,
Right.
He would be talking and the house would be sort of like a voiceover.
Okay.
But once I thought of it being a love story, I actually decided that it was going to be in Mixtec, which is the native language of my mother. It's also the native language of the writer. And part of it was pragmatic in the sense that the actress that I had in mind does not speak Mixtec. She has Mixtec heritage, but she's not a speaker. I'm also not a speaker of Mixtec.
Okay.
So I always thought I need to have the possibility to have someone else do the voiceover in case she doesn't manage to do it. That was one reason, and the other reason was that Mixtec is an indigenous language in Mexico. There are 69 different indigenous languages in Mexico, and most of them have been pushed very much to the side. It's only very recent, like the last 10 years at the most, that indigenous languages have been recognized as national languages. And before that, what I know of my mother and also my husband is that as a child you were chastised and you had to pay a fee, or maybe were even hit by teachers if you were speaking Mixtec in school, or any other indigenous language for that matter. So it was also a comment on how these languages have no space in
They
Mexican
were almost
society.
outlawed in a way.
Exactly. So that's one of the reasons that I choose to work with voice-off.
Okay. Well, I think it introduces a different dynamic, right? If they're speaking the same language, it's maybe a little easier to see this, let's say, love story or relationship happen, but when it's across languages and they do it through letters or the notes, it introduces, I don't know, it's almost like to me, it's kind of like a magical connection there, right? I mean, is that part of the idea, or?
Well, a very human connection. For example, my mother speaks Mixtec, and I grew up in the Netherlands, and we migrated there when I was 6 and I lost the language, but I always, not always, actually quite recently I started to realize that this must have been very lonely for her, that it's very hard to be in a place where you have nobody else to speak in your mother tongue with. Of course she spoke Spanish and she spoke English, but there's a whole world, a very intimate world that you cannot share with people if you don't have anybody else who speaks your mother tongue. So I think that was an important element in the film, like this human connection based on language.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting way to approach this love story and the relationship even. But so the other thing is this film also has a very specific commentary or examination of the environment or like an ecological crisis, right? Is that also a very part of the prominent story that you wanted to make sure to get in?
Yes, and I did balance that out with the love story because I thought if it is all doom and gloom, then you lose hope and you're not encouraged to do anything about it.
Yes.
So that is one of the reasons that the love story became an important element, because I thought it cannot just be a very dystopian story about food security or food insecurity being a thing and oxygen being a thing. So in a way I pushed the climate change story to the background and it became more of the setting.
Yes.
But I have noticed that audiences do react to it and are sort of preoccupied, so I'm quite happy with that. But yes, it has been something that we've been thinking about in the sense that the Mishtek area suffers a lot from droughts. It can become very dry and there are a lot of wildfires. I think in Houston you have the opposite, you have like tornadoes and things. Yeah. But they've increased with the last, let's say, 5 years, and we wonder if that is partially
direct
also
result of
climate change.
Yeah, okay.
So that's something we wanted to address as an issue that's affecting indigenous communities right now.
Yeah. It's interesting the way that you depict it even. So, I mean, I don't know if it's maybe a choice of a cinematographer or your choice or just the locations that you have. Some of them are very striking. Some of them are very like industrial and very contemporary or even futuristic in a sense. But then you also balance that with shots of nature and the water and all of that. So did you find like you had to kind of figure out when to really hit those and when to back off? Or?
Yes, I was the cinematographer on the project. So
oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was the entire crew basically.
Okay.
So I shot by myself. It's a self-shot film, and I chose the locations again for pragmatic reasons. We wanted to keep, it's a climate change film partially, so we wanted to keep our footprint as low as possible, and we did very crazy things like walking to the locations.
Okay.
So I chose the locations on how far they were from my home, which was our base.
Okay.
So, but then again, we live in an area that has a lot of old industrial buildings, and I thought actually they're very old, but because they're so industrial, they have this sort of dystopic, sci-fi, futuristic aspect to them. So that's how I ended up choosing these.
Okay, so that's interesting though. So you really were conscious about how much you were affecting, whether it was your usage. I mean, we're talking about power usage and your footprint, basically.
Yes.
Everything.
Everything. Conventional film, we're not talking about major, bigger Marvel productions or even Oppenheimer, but Hollywood, traditional standard Hollywood film has a footprint of about 3,000 tons of CO2. That is the same as 300 cars turned on for the entire year, every day.
Wow. Okay.
Or 3,000 flights back and forth from the UK to the US. So it's a massive footprint.
Yes.
And we wanted to make something as tiny as possible.
Okay.
So we walked to set, we worked on location, so we didn't build anything. We used props that we already had. We sourced wardrobe from charity shops and then donated them back to participate in a circular economy.
Sure.
Everything was walking, unless the one location that was farther away was the beach, and we took a bus. And that was also the reason that I decided to self-shoot, so that it would be a tiny crew and we wouldn't have a very big catering, traveling,
Yeah.
all those kind of things. So that was sort of our plan.
That's a dedicated, it's a commitment to being responsible, and I think I appreciate that. I think a lot of people who see the film, especially, would appreciate oh, it's not just for show, just to get something that looks good. You really did take it all into account.
Yeah,
even making it.
We counted our footprint. In the UK, you have a carbon calculator called We Are Albert, and we ended up below 1 ton of CO2, which is less than my flight here. So in a way, I do feel a little bit guilty of being here. But then again, I really wanted to know what a Latino audience in the US would think of this film.
Okay. Well, so yes, we're glad you're here. We're glad the film is here. So you just had your screening a little while ago, right? So I guess it went well. I didn't get to go in there, but
yes, we had lots of positive reactions and also conversations about both language and climate change, which were the main ingredients of the film. So I'm very happy.
Yeah. Okay. So you feel like it's working. It's a success.
Yes.
You're getting it.
The audience is getting what we tried to communicate.
Awesome. That's great. That's great then. So we just want to have a conversation. Anything else you want to talk about with the film, or anything?
I think we touched upon most things, unless there's anything you're interested in. I think.
I tell you what. Your cast. So you have two. It's just the two actors, really. So how did you kind of find? I know you said there was the language issue, but how did you find these two people? Because they don't really have on-screen chemistry, so it's not necessarily a requirement. Although they have seen some shots together, right? So was it maybe a different approach to casting, or?
I casted the actress because I already worked with her on my previous feature film, In Times of Rain, so Alejandra Herrera, and I really wanted to work with her again because I really like her work.
Okay.
And I know that she has Mixtec heritage, but I also knew that she didn't speak the language, so I always knew this might be slightly an issue. And then the actor is actually the writer of the film, also wrote all the texts. And I thought I'm not going to find anybody else in Scotland who speaks Mixtec.
Okay.
So he's going to be the actor. Originally the plan was that the letters would be across Mexico and Edinburgh.
Okay.
But the actress at some point sent me a message and said, you know what, I'm going to be in France to do a workshop, an acting workshop. And after that I'll be free to film. And I just went well, if you're in France, that's just, that's across the channel. Why don't you come to Edinburgh and we make the whole film here? And because we hadn't written a script, we just turned the whole story around.
Okay. Yeah.
To be letters in one single city.
So it all really worked out then.
Yeah, it was quite organic.
Okay. Well, good. Great. Because I feel like I said, they don't really have a lot of interaction with each other. They're in different places at different times, but there's something about even just in their eyes, in their movement, you feel like they are going through this experience that the characters are going through.
Yes, I realized that because they didn't have text, every gesture and every look, every time they would look at each other or look away became gigantically important. Yeah. So everything focused on where are they looking, how are they looking, what are they giving to each other, when are they giving the letters to each other. It was quite a challenge, to be honest.
Okay. So, well, again, great job with the film. Thanks for being here with the festival. And are you going to stick around and see anything else, or?
Yes, I hope to stick around today and tomorrow and see more films.
Okay, well, great.
Really enjoying the festival.
All right, well, that's good to hear. So, we'll see you around. I'll be here, and we'll enjoy some more films.
Thank you.
All right,
Good
thanks
to
a lot.
meet you.